Yes, yes. This session was amazing. So much to unpack. I love that we talked about total cost of ownership and how that relates back to usability, driving those end users towards tools that are really going to make their job easier and to make procurement more sticky within the organization. Phenomenal. And getting the CEO's perspective on the Silicon Valley Bank collapse. I mean, just that picture, it is like a nightmare. It is like a movie. I appreciate that so much. It's a difficult climate. It has been a difficult climate for procurement, supply chain, and spend management. And you all outlined that beautifully and provided some great tips and advice for folks to move forward. So with that, I am so excited to pass it over to Helen. This is the Ditch the Bad and Embrace the Good, how procurement can level up their skill set. Thank you so much, Helen. Take it away.
Thanks very much, Katie, for that lovely introduction there. I'm delighted to be joining you today to host this panel, which we've provocatively entitled Up Your Procurement Game. And joining me on the panel today, I've got three really experienced practitioners from the field. So I'm delighted to introduce to you Kay Hughes, Hughes and Rhonda Jenkins, and Raffi Doursounian to join me here today. So let's welcome them onto the stage now. Welcome, Kay, and welcome to the session. So let's get cracking with some introductions whilst our panelists get onto stage. And let's start with you, Kay. Can you give our attendees today a bit of a feel for you, what you're doing just now in your role and your experience? So tell us all about it, Kay.
Okay. Welcome to this wonderful session. I thought that was great for Lehigh. It was very interesting. I made a bunch of notes. So my experience, I've been in procurement about 30 years. I have done just about everything. Every time I switched jobs, I moved to a different area of procurement. So I started in manufacturing. I moved to an international service company and did products there and services there. Then I went to fire safety, and then I went to hazardous chemicals, and now I am in a finance company, Mr. Cooper, which is also known as Nation Star Mortgage. And for the past 7 years, I have been purchasing IT, which is entirely different and fast moving than any other industry.
Absolutely, and that's such a great category to be involved in at the moment. As you say, very fluid, have to be on your tippy toes. So I think we're going to get some great insight from you today in the discussion. Okay, let's move over to Raffi then. Welcome, Raffi, to the panel discussion. Tell us a bit about yourself and your experience.
Thank you very much, Helen. I've been in procurement over 30 years. I was my way in my background is engineering. I went from engineering to operations and materials management and over into pure contract management. I was at Fortune 100 financial services company for 17 years as a senior contracts manager, managing many different categories of purchasing, and most recently financial risk and data analytics contracts, before moving on to my current role at Commonwealth Financial Network as managing the procurement and contracts team, where we are currently in the process of transforming our procurement organization to hopefully world-class and benefits. It's a fantastic situation I'm in now. I have a very, very strong leadership team who we all trust one another. We've all been in good procurement environments, so we know what's good and we know what's bad, and we're trying to bring in everything good and avoid everything that's bad. So it's very interesting.
Sounds fascinating. Sounds great to have such an experienced team around you. And I believe you've got a Six Sigma qualification. So that sounds like you're quite an agile procurement person too. Is that right?
Yes, at Liberty Mutual, at the Fortune 100 financial services company, that's an insurance company, we were transforming into a Lean Six Sigma customer experience management model, where I did a stint to learn the trade, the Six Sigma methodology, and so became a certified coach in the Liberty Mutual's program. And it's one of those things where nobody ever wants to go back to doing it the old way, and it becomes part of your DNA, and everything you do has that aspect to it. Is very thoughtful and productive approach.
Brilliant. Okay, that sounds like something that's really useful for people in procurement, particularly when they're looking to improve. Okay, last but by no means least, we've got Rhonda Jenkins, but I believe you like to be called RJ. So welcome to the panel, RJ, and tell us about yourself and your experience.
Thank you very much, Helen, and thank you everyone for having me. My name is Rhonda Jenkins. As Helen mentioned, a lot of people call me RJ, but you can call me either. My background is working with law firms. I've worked inside big law as well as small to mid-sized law firms for most of my career in the capacity of managing the law firm operations. I've also worn the hat of IT manager. I've also worn the hat of, you just name it, they call me the Swiss Army knife of law firm management. But one of the areas that I worked in the law practice world was with the risk management teams and working with general counsel's office to essentially provide some order to the chaos of working with lawyers and legal teams. My experience with procurement really dives deep into IT, as well as all of the other spend that goes on in the legal practice. So I have quite a bit of experience managing that. In my most recent role, I'm now providing consulting services to law firms, small to mid-sized firms, as well as legal departments around legal operations. And we'll talk a little bit about some of my recent experience working in legal ops and standing up a legal ops department, and how that department actually worked as the mission control for spend for our organization. So that's a little bit about me.
Brilliant. The Swiss Army knife of procurement. I like that. I like that hand. You have to put that in your LinkedIn title. Okay, well, let's get into the discussion then. And we'll start with a bit of a challenging question for you all. Your CEO comes into the room and they ask you, now, what's the one thing we need to improve about procurement? What do we need to change? What would your answer be? Let's start with Kay. What would you say to your CEO?
The first thing I would say, and it's the same thing every company I've worked at, data extraction, getting the information. I know that Lehigh talked about that quite a bit, and if you don't know what you've purchased, what you're going to, what a current status is, and what you are going to purchase, you are blind. You are making decisions without all of the information. So the first thing I would be saying to the CEO is, have you ever heard the phrase garbage in, garbage out? Well, our reporting system is putting garbage in and we're pulling garbage out. We need to fine tune all of that data and extract accurate data, not just lumps of data, not just megabytes of data, terabytes of data. We need accurate data to make business decisions on your behalf and with you and with all of the other departments. So that's the first thing I would tell the CEO we need.
Get that garbage
Yes.
cleaned and that data going. Yeah. Brilliant. What about you, Raffi? What would you say when that CEO walks through the door?
Well, it's sometimes it's hard to put in an elevator pitch, but I'd say many times the biggest obstacle is just negative perception that has come from many, I guess, ill-conceived or ill-launched programs in procurement historically. It encompasses many different things, you know, negative perception, and those obstacles can come from, you know, many different areas, and become, you know, one of the biggest obstacles to procurement success. I think you can have great data, you can have great areas, you know, great successes in many different areas of procurement, but if the negative perceptions remain, I think you're going to have continued obstacles going forward, and you know, can severely hinder the success of the procurement's maturity within an organization. So I think to overcome those, you need to sort of know all of the different areas that need to be addressed in procurement, understand what has happened in the past, and strategize on how you're going to overcome those and build trust and pave the way for successes in the future. Mm-hmm.
Okay, RJ, what about you then? You've not got a CEO at the moment because you're doing consultancy, but if you were back at the coalface with the procurement team, what would you say to the CEO when they walk through the door?
I would say stop being the person that's making this harder than it needs to be, and I need you, CEO, to get behind us, the team that's looking to help you avoid risk, manage processes, save money, all the things that procurement brings to the table for the organization. I need the CEO to really back that and be my executive sponsor.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting. We did a survey at Art of Procurement where we looked at what CEOs spent their time on. It was a survey. It was a survey result that we talked about with colleagues at BCG, and they said that CEOs only spend 1% of their time thinking about suppliers and the spend that procurement deals with. Do you think that's because they're not worrying about us at all, RJ? Or how can we raise that profile? You've said that they need to back us, but how can we overcome that challenge? How can we get them to back us more? What can we do to sort of make the case for them to pay a bit more attention to us?
Yeah, I think the business case is really strong when you start to show the data, like to Kay's point. When you got your arms around the data, the dollars and cents and the timelines, and you look at the budgets and you look at what that spend means to the business, and the CEO and all the C's are fretting about sales, etc. But potentially hemorrhaging money when it comes to things that they've purchased, don't realize how much their spend is maybe wasted spend, or maybe not, but maybe not directed in the right ways and methods where they're getting the best bang for their buck. And so I think the way to their hearts is really through the data that comes from looking at how much and how you're spending your procurement dollars.
Okay, well that's actually quite a nice way to segue back to Kay then. So you've talked about data, RJ's followed up there with data. So if we need to make that change, what do we actually need to improve to get that garbage a lot cleaner? What can we do?
I've seen it done several ways. One is bringing in consultants to clean it up and create a valid spend analysis or a spend cube to say, this is what happened before, this is what you ordered, this is how many, this is how much you paid for this one. And then you dig into the analysis. You can do it in-house or with a consultant, but you have to end up with that massive amount of data that you trust. The trust is where you need it. Anybody can pull out data. And as if you're a large company, sometimes you'll get an analyst assigned to you out of finance or something. That's always a good way to get it done as well. However, once you get the data and you're confident in the information that is being delivered to you, you can start building strategies. You can find out, for example, you've got 6 suppliers supplying one item that is consistent across all. How do you consolidate that? So basically, the data just gives you the next step of what is your vendor management strategy? How are you going to consolidate? How are you going to reduce risk? How can you improve those KPIs of delivery on time, backup? I'm a very big believer in managing your suppliers on an 80-20 rule. 80% of your spend is in 20% of the vendors, and then 80% of your vendors have 20% of the spend. And those are the low risk items. The high risk items you are managing with your thumb on that data and watching it every day. You pull reports, you just make sure things are being done. Now to flip that is in production and manufacturing and things like that. You flip over to IT, it's an entirely different world where new technology comes up constantly. It can come up on a daily basis. It can come up by a conversation to the CEO and he says, hey, we need to get this company on board. I want them to do this with my data and get me the information or produce this customer facing app, things like that. So flip from a manufacturing environment, which is pretty stable because you have a product, you have something you can see, to something that is ones and zeros. And flipping for that, you have to build in flexibility across the board from all departments, from the CEO down to the last person that's at the call center. Flexibility, make change the constant in the company.
That's really helpful. I mean, that was a lot of really good advice there, a lot of tactical advice, which I think, hopefully everybody who's attending is making notes there, because there was lots of nuggets of gold there that people can use. Raffi, let's go back to your point about this negative perception, because I think it links very nicely into the next topic we were going to cover, which is about buy-in from stakeholders. So, if we've got this reputation in the company for being blockers, being people that slow things down, perhaps being people that are very administrative in their language and the way people see us, how can we actually create an environment where people think positively about us, and also where our stakeholders buy into the things we're trying to do?
Sure. I think you need to, so we're a service, we're servicing everyone in the company. We need to understand what our customers want. Those are those stakeholders. And in order to really understand what they want, you need to meet with them. You need to have discussions. You need to demonstrate that you're empathetic. You want to demonstrate that you are really actually interested in helping them solve their problems, or helping them support their objectives, their business objectives. Hopefully that all ties up into the corporate objectives too. Makes things a little bit easier, so everyone's on the same page. And so meeting with folks and part of my experiences over time, over my many years in procurement, have been going through many transformations, going from rudimentary to a little bit better than that, and a little bit better than that, and all the way over into category strategy model methodologies. So you sometimes you have to, when you're meeting with these stakeholders in the effort to transform into a good procurement, let's say, quote unquote, good procurement, is understanding what pain points have been. And I think ideally, so, one of the biggest problems I've seen is that a procurement organization will try to will establish, try to establish like a one-size-fits-all solution, and that frequently doesn't work. That frequently fails. So you need to understand what each segment of your stakeholders need, and try to address those needs individually. And so as you're building a procurement process, those can become variances in your playbook, for example, and then hopefully you find commonalities where that become a standard with variances. So understanding that it's okay to do that, and being able to support that, I think, is very important.
Excellent. Anything to add on the stakeholders then? Perhaps RJ, is there anything you'd like to sort of chip into the advice that we can offer here for our attendees?
Yeah, I mean, just to underscore what Raffi's saying around getting people engaged and involved, and making sure that they understand that you're here to help support and service their needs and requirements. But the business also needs to have certain level of guardrails, right? So people can't just go crazy, but at the same time, you need to make sure that depending on the organizational structure and the culture of the company, that people are empowered, and that they are understanding that procurement is a service, and it should not be a blocker, but it should be a enabler. And that's the thing, is to have an understanding between the business units, that the folks responsible for procurement are enablers and not disablers.
Mm-hmm. That's brilliant. And final word then to you, Kay. Working in the IT category, probably quite a challenging role sometimes to engage with those stakeholders. What advice have you got for our attendees today?
Communication. I have a weekly meeting with IT. I have a weekly meeting with finance. I have a weekly meeting that involves finance and IT with the CIO approving projects. Give updates. We track everything. When Lee was talking about how much spend do you have under control, IT probably, in the company I work with, has probably 99% of it under control. And that is because of communication. We are constantly saying, what's coming up for renewal? Are we replacing this program, this app, this tool? And then you're faced with the business acronyms of IT, and they start talking in acronyms, and it's the same in every business, but you have to learn and keep evolving, particularly in IT. In manufacturing, it's very, very stable. They've been using the same acronyms over the years. IT invents their own acronyms. They go off and do that. Suddenly everyone's using it. Again, it's change, but you have to communicate, and you have to tell them you're on their team. You're there to help. You are not there to be a roadblock. However, I can't tell you how many times I'm telling them, you can't do that. you've got to do it this way. Do you have the money? Do you have the budget? Have you got buy-in from your executives? So I'm coaching them as well, and other lines of business besides IT, to say, ask these questions and say, have you knocked out all of these roadblocks before you engage me? Because if you don't have it in budget and somebody's going to kill it, I've wasted my time. You've wasted your time. So communication is probably the biggest success story that we've had at the company that I work at. So.
Excellent. That's the thread that's gone through all the answers then, that engagement, that communication with stakeholders. Okay, we've had a question in the chat about a tough CEO and what to do if we can't break through. And I think that a good way to answer that will be to move on to some of the questions we've got on our list for next. And RJ, I'd like to move to you then, because I know that you've identified thousands of dollars in wasted spend just because of missed renewals. So how do you actually identify this in real time, and how do you get to those thousands of dollars and put that evidence in front of the CEO that they can't ignore about the value of procurement? Share with us what you've done.
Sure. So one of the challenges I had in starting up a legal operations team in a small company, about $15 million a year company, just to give some context, was the processes around how decisions were made were very, casual, shall we say. Pre-COVID, everyone worked in the same room. So everyone kind of had a sense of what everyone else was doing, what they were buying. The CEO got to give the thumbs up or the thumbs down. They talked a lot. Communication was free-flowing constantly. And fast forward 8 years later, and COVID comes along and happens to this startup casual company, and now they're a real company. Things got a little bit hairy in terms of how spend was managed. It wasn't managed. Each department head got to spend X amount of dollars, got an approval via Slack. We go way back to these description of bad systems and processes around approvals and things, and no visibility. Talk about no visibility. Things were buried in Slack, and contracts were signed by department heads, and there was no central management at all. So along comes RJ to the company, and we spun up a legal operations team, which was responsible for collecting all of the company's contracts. And to Kay's point about data, collecting all the data around all the contracts, which involved us doing an audit of what the company's who are the company's vendors, what categories do they fit in, what are the renewal dates on the contracts, what were the terms for assignability, because we were expecting a potential merger or acquisition event. So we had to have our act together. We had to know everything there was to know about all of the contracts and all the liabilities that the company had. And so taking that information and looking at it as an opportunity to, how are we managing our renewals, and where are areas that we might be able to just say, hey, put the brakes on that one, because we're not using that tool anymore. One thing that we found that our IT guys were, our IT folk were doing was they would play with things, which was completely part of our culture, to allow sandbox environments and because we were developing software. So they were using various tools and technologies to develop the company's product. And sometimes they worked and sometimes they didn't. Well, the whole thing about, sort of lean methodology is to fail quickly and move on. What they weren't doing was they weren't canceling the contracts. So what we found on the legal ops side in evaluating what our usage was of these various tools was there were hundreds of thousands of dollars being spent on tools. are no longer being used. They'd been abandoned or orphaned by a previous manager who decided their project, you needed to use a different tool and didn't really tell anyone. So, the contract just kept renewing and renewing and renewing. And there were certain contracts where the monthly spend was over $30,000 a month. So it starts to add up real quick when you look at it across the whole enterprise. And what we found by doing that initial audit of all of our vendors and capturing the data, that there was over $400,000, at least in the first year, that we were able to save just in contract renewals, just by not renewing contracts that didn't need to be renewed. So that's my story.
That's a fantastic amount of savings there. And if Kay was nodding her head there, did you concur about the IT playing with the products and then not switching them off? Is that something you've come across?
Well, I kept nodding my head because one of our KPIs on our annual goals in procurement is, did we let any renewals go forward without looking at them? And RJ is just spot on about the sandbox. They try something. Every software company in the world offers you a free trial, but then you have to cancel and then not canceling. And that's where you're letting money just flow out the door. So I'm fully on board with what RJ did and her strategy of coming in to identify where your money was, where you were losing money. And definitely it should be one of procurement's goals. So.
Brilliant. Okay, well, I'm seeing a few questions in the chat and in the Q&A, so thank you very much. Keep asking them. Hope preferably in the Q&A, but we'll clock them in the chat as well. Raffi, let's go over to you then. We've got a question here about being a lone wolf procurement manager. Now, for me, I'm watching Yellowstone at the moment, so you're making me think of wolves on the prairies with the cattle, but a lone wolf procurement manager operating a bit on your own then, what tips have you got, in terms of optimizing all that work where you're looking at these contracts, you're trying to keep on top of things and not getting overwhelmed? What advice can you give our attendees today?
Sure. In the interest of not ending up at the train station, right, Helen? Not to Yellowstone. Yeah, so it's a lot of stuff that you have to do. I think of it as getting your arms around everything you need to accomplish, everything that you need to do, the critical aspects, and then getting on to work thoughtfully and not frantically, proactively as opposed to reactively, if you will. So I guess I would view it as, getting your arms around everything you need to accomplish is an exercise in, cataloging everything that you're going to do, and sort of, I think, to sort of a model of a prioritization table coming out of a root cause problem solving exercise in Lean Six Sigma. Is, think of all the tasks that are within your scope of work or scope of responsibilities. Are you, responsible for contract management, sourcing, category management, purchasing, reporting, supply diversity, everything, whatever you need to do, that's a critical task. And then start, so record, capture how often is the task being done, hourly, daily, weekly, etc. How does the work come to you? Is it through a system? Is it drop-bys, email, IMs, whatever? Where is the work being done? Is it in a system? Is it offline? Is it on paper? How long does it take to complete? Note if there are any deadlines. And then sort of, you'll need to apply, I find it helpful to apply impact and effort factors to each of these lines. So, and then like those ratings on those last two, impact and effort, they'll help you manage the helps me manage and prioritize effectively. And, you know, those can be simple as high, medium, and low. And then heat mapping also can provide a good visual as well in when you see all of these tasks that you have to do. Sometimes color coding is very helpful. And think about what tasks can be accomplished in groups. Doing things in groups can sometimes you know, reduce the setup time for a particular task. And then, you know, once you've got your arms around everything you need to do, and you try to start, if at all possible, if as much as possible, set aside time to work on certain tasks at certain times of the week, of the day, etc. And then so you know, to the extent that you could maybe only review or get reply to your emails, let's say, certain times of the day, or by, you know, commit to your replying by the end of the day, or every other day. I don't know, you know, depending on how your work is. And then, you know, it's important that you're not the only one that knows this. It's, you know, communicate your schedule to your stakeholders and managers and set expectations for the deliverables and the turnaround time, so they're not, you know, hounding you. First of all, they're reaching out to you for information, and then they're hounding you for an update. So, you know, it's counterproductive. And you want to capture all this, record your cycle times and the metrics, well, for metrics reporting for yourselves, for yourself, for your department. And, you know, that will lead to you building a case for hiring staff potentially. And then, you know, you're going to have to, well, you know, as I think RJ mentioned earlier, continually improve. So you're going to continually review your schedules and your processes, and in order to, you know, pursue efficiencies. Can you, after doing, you know, all of your tasks in a certain way for so long, can you offload any of the work? Can you eliminate any unnecessary tasks? Create self-service opportunities for your stakeholders, so they're not pinging you for an answer for something that they can just read and do, for especially for those high volume, low risk, low value, maybe transactional work. And, you know, very, very important, minimizing distractions and time consuming information requests. Prepare and publish a playbook. And facts, FAQs, to be used as reference guides and guidelines for stakeholders. And then, you know, continually review and adjust and publicize frequently. Hopefully some or all of that can apply and make things manageable.
Yeah, and you know, a lot of nodding from the other panelists around the self-service, trying to leverage what you can to help people help themselves. Kay, thinking about optimization, you know, and Raffi talked there about that balance between impact and effort. But, you know, the thing we need to balance when we're thinking about outcomes is cost savings against quality and value. You know, how can we actually do that? How can a procurement team balance that cost versus quality dynamic when they're making decisions? What have you found, and what can you share with us on that topic?
Just I ask the same questions. When a new request comes in, I ask the same questions. Is this a need or a want? Is it in budget, out of budget? Is the purchase aligned with the overall company goals? Because you get maverick lines of business saying, hey, this is a great idea, but does it align with the overall company goals, and getting them back on track? That's one thing, that's the start of it. And the process is optimized because I'm asking the same questions, getting the same answers, and these answers lead me in a decision queue or a decision tree. So after that, if everything is, you know, green lit all the way, we rely on a lot of templates. I have email templates. I'm sending out a non-disclosure agreement. I'm sending out an MSA, statement of work. What do we need in those statements of work? I have multiple templates to use that I tweak for that situation. If you like, every other procurement team I've ever worked with in or on and met with, the volume has increased exponentially as you get buy-in from all of the lines of business, all of the other departments. Your work level just increases incredibly. And going back to what Raffi said, documenting, how many statements of work we did, how many MSAs, how long did it take us to do that? Those kind of hard KPIs are where you can ask for more people, where you can recognize where you've got a gap and why you're not providing the service to the company or to the other lines of businesses, and dropping down that complaint factor by presenting, this is data, this is why we're getting complaints, is because we don't have enough people, or this system or this process needs to be refined. It needs to be right sized. It needs to be contracted. And going again to what Raffi says, how much can we point them to a system that says, this is where you find that data, go for that. If it's high dollar, high risk, high profile, of course, you're going to manage it personally, but that low risk, low dollar items, hey, go look it up here. Here's the link. You'll find everything you need to know in there. So prioritizing what needs to be prioritized, pushing off the low risk, low dollar items and say, go look here. I think I get between 100 and 150 emails a day. I mean, I have to prioritize what is important, what isn't. And to do that, you have to have templates. You have to have shortcuts that you have built into your process. There's always the system process, but getting information into that system is where you have to work behind the scenes to say, hey, this is the form I need. Here, I've uploaded it. These are the questions we need to ask. I've plagiarized this from another one. I mean, you've just got to work smartly to optimize how you do things and how procurement works.
That's great. Thanks for that. Thanks for that, Kay. Now we've got a couple of questions, and I quite like to just get to them with some quick answers because we've only got a few minutes left. So the first one is about new suppliers. So it's a question from Regina there, and she's asking, we need companies to think about new suppliers. A new supplier gets in front of procurement or a stakeholder, and they've got one shot really to make that impression. What advice would you give to a new supplier that gets that opportunity to really make an impact? RJ, let's go to you for a tip for the new supplier.
Sure. I think the most important thing is for the supplier to have an understanding of the business and the business need, and not, just come at their pitch, if you will, with a canned approach, but to do their homework, learn about the business, understand if there are any unique requirements, any unique value propositions that their tool has to offer to that business, and really become a bit of a quick expert around how their tool can fit that business's needs and requirements.
Excellent. And then final question, I think, to all three of you, and it comes from one that Vishal's asked in the chat there. And it links to our question about upping our procurement game. If there's one tip that we could give to our audience today about being more efficient, being more effective, upping our game, what would that be? So let's start with UK. What would you say is the tip you'd like to leave us with?
I would say you need to investigate chat. You need to investigate AI. The whole business is changing. You need to know what a smart contract is. You need to know what a blockchain is. You need to know new things because you may end up speaking with your first touch with a company, maybe with a chat bot rather than a
Mhm.
person. You've got to understand the limitations and what are your workarounds and how do you get to that next level because that is coming so fast, it's unbelievable.
Brilliant. What about you, Raffi? What would your tip be?
I would say data. Quality of your data is tantamount. Gather data, improve data, aggregate your data in all areas, all the time as much as you can. It's the basis for sound management decisions in every area.
Brilliant. And what about you, RJ? Final word for you in terms of the tip.
I think that having a system of record and having a source of truth, and to Raffi's point around data and Kay's point around what's happening new with technology and Chat GPT and other AI tools, I think that systems of record, like Opstream as an example, are going to play a pivotal role in helping you get your act together.
Brilliant. So we went from cleaning up our garbage to being thoughtful and not frantic to really getting our heads around tech and being on the front foot around that. Thank you so much to our panel today. That's Kay Hughes, Raffi Doursounian, sorry Raffi for butchering your surname there, and RJ for joining us to up our procurement game. And over to you, Katie, for the next session.
Okay.